And I just hope everybody really is aware of how historical this moment is that we're living through. Keep in mind, 1937, cannabis was criminalized. And the focus of the law enforcement has always been us, obviously, right? A lot of that went down right here. If not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's lives have been upended by this magical, powerful plant that once again has killed no one. The next panel I want to introduce is going to be real dynamic. The title is Budding Opportunities, pun intended. The economic impact of cannabis in New York City. To moderate this panel, we're going to have Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine, and the panelists will include Dasheeda Dawson, the cannabis czar, who was just up here dropping mad knowledge, Tanisha Robinson, a cannabis entrepreneur, Vikiana Reyes, who's the program coordinator of cannabis education at CUNY, Medgar Evers College, and she's the founder of CORE, a 501c3. So we'd like the panelists to come up, take a seat, and let's get it on.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Mark Levine, Manhattan Borough President. You are in the borough that's in the center of the universe. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. The borough that has, count them, 3 dispensaries open, and they're doing great, more than any other jurisdiction in New York State. Do I have that right? And the borough with the first university level bachelor's and I think master's in cannabis management at FIM. That's Manhattan. We're off to a good start here, right? The epicenter. I am thrilled with this panel, but first I want to thank Happy Monkey and my brother Jesse Campoamor, who's over there. Give him his own round of applause. Happy Monkey is about so much more than a product. It's about a mindset that there's an opportunity for positivity here, for people to advance who otherwise might be left behind. And that's what today's all about. And I so appreciate their partnership. So thank you. We got other great sponsors here today. I want to thank Community Board 9. If you don't know what that is, you're here in CB9, which has been one of the leaders citywide, I might even say statewide, in preparing for this moment. And thank you, Columbia, for giving us this beautiful space. Thank you, RWDSU Local 338, who's going to ensure that we have a workforce with the protections and rights that they deserve. And finally, thank you to MKX Cannabis. You're going to be very happy that the great Dasheeda Dawson is back. She's back for more. I don't think that I need to reintroduce you. I think you are well known to the public. But I'm thrilled that we are joined by Tanisha Robinson, who is a serial entrepreneur who has started and grown and sold now.
And burned to the ground. And burned to the ground.
That's part of it. But you've had more successes than failures.
Yeah, sure.
In the tech space and consumer-facing products, and is now an entrepreneur in the cannabis space with a pretty cool product that maybe she will describe. Originally from Ohio, she escaped.
No, actually, I'm originally from Missouri, which is how we say it there.
Even worse.
Yeah.
And where would you be living now?
I live in Long Island City.
Good answer. Well played. Well played. Major upgrade. And our final panelist, Vikiana Reyes, and I don't know where you live, but maybe Brooklyn because that's where you work. Do I have that right?
Yes, and we spread love.
Esto se
That's
puede
the
hacer en
only way.
español, mijo.
Brooklyn.
Prepárense.
Y si quieres hacerme la entrevista en español, yo te puedo responder.
Y el hebreo también, muy bien.
En inglés y en español.
Oh, pues eso va a ser bilingüe. How's your Spanish?
I could read it and write it.
That's
Thank
not
you,
help you here.
Princeton. No, it's not.
That's not going to help you here. Okay, well, en inglés o español, se lo cuento. She is the director of cannabis education coordinator at the CUNY Medgar Evers College. The fact that we even have that title and that program is amazing. Is this the first such program in the CUNY system?
So CUNY first is the largest public educational system in America, period. So we were the first minor degree program in CUNY and the only.
Okay.
I will share some secrets later, but only if you guys keep it
Go
in
ahead.
this room.
We won't tweet it out. Go ahead.
So is Jesse here? Okay, he's somewhere here. I have for everyone a couple of these pamphlets, flyers, which looks and kind of depicts the different courses that we created for the minor degree program. And initially, it has rolled out as a minor degree program, but we saw some flaws. And it's kind of the same story that has transcended it into education as well, which is providing quality education to constituents, but constituents sometimes don't have the money, right? So access is a problem, whether it be, I'm sure Tanisha will expand on this, not only in entrepreneurism, but in education too. And so I'll share a secret with you guys. If you, on the back of the flyers, we're having a showcase, which is the politically correct term for what others would call a block party. But the educational system will use the word showcase on the last Saturday of the month at Medgar Evers College, which is in Brooklyn. And so there, if you would like, you can sign up for what is going to be now the associates and bachelors and masters in cannabis science. And that means that not only do we provide a form of access to those who have limited income, but we're doing it with a educational program that is at this point, not because I'm saying it, but what I've been told, one of the tops. In addition to that, CUNY has this amazing initiative for all of their schools, which is the Excelsior Scholarship. And the Excelsior Scholarship allows you, if you don't have an associate's or a bachelor's, to get your associate's or your bachelor's for free. So one of our biggest things this year was to make sure that our constituents have access to education, and we would love for you to come through on the 29th and sign up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yo no terminé de presentarte tampoco. You have more credentials. I want to mention that you are also the founder of Legacy Core Foundation, which has been working to ensure that those most harmed by cannabis criminalization will reap the benefits of the blossoming legal industry. So a lot to talk about. And finally, I want to acknowledge that we have some leaders in my office. I told you Manhattan is going hard, the Borough President's office. We are really putting resources into this, and we have some amazing leaders that are dedicated to this work. Our Deputy Manhattan Borough President, Keisha Sutton-James. I think she's in the hall on a Zoom. You can applaud for Keisha. She's awesome. And we've also got Keisha Smith, who is our director running it, who I think is in the green room. But you know both the Keishas.
I do.
So they're great, right?
They're
okay,
amazing.
Good. Let's just observe that we're coming up on 420. And this is the first 420 where cannabis in New York is out of the shadows. We had challenges here. As Dasheeda liked to say, we're going to have real talk. We're not going to shy away from the challenges. But it is a remarkable thing that we have legalized, licensed dispensaries now happening for the first time ever. We are at the dawn of this new era after a failed 85-year experiment in prohibition and criminalization, which has led to untold human harm, disproportionately in communities of color. And we have a chance now to do something about that, to put economic power right back into the communities who were most directly harmed. And I think that we can feel really good that New York has articulated that vision. But again, as Dasheeda said, other states have articulated that vision well. And none of them have succeeded in fulfilling it, in my opinion, adequately. At the end of the day, every other state that's talked about equity, we've seen a small number of players, not from the communities that were impacted by criminalization, start to dominate. And New York has designed a program with a lot of thought and a lot of resources to avoid that, to become the first state that does it right. But even here, it's not a given that we will succeed. And I think we can admit that we are behind already. Certainly we're behind on how many operators we wanted actually with their doors open at this point in April of 2023. And I think we have a threat that's emerged even worse than we feared of unlicensed retail, that in Manhattan alone is probably 500 unlicensed retail operators, at least 1,500 citywide. And if we don't get that under control, there is no way the legalized program will succeed. There's just no way. We're not going to be able to compete. U.S. operators are not going to be able to compete with 1,500 unlicensed stores that are not paying taxes and complying with all the safety and regulations that are needed. Forget about all the harm that they're doing and selling to young people without checking ID, and selling products that appeal to little kids. Also being a magnet for robberies because they deal almost exclusively in cash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have challenges there. But this panel is actually about opportunity. It's about the upside. And I hope we're going to talk about not just the upside for entrepreneurs, for owners, which is I think a lot of you in this room, but there are tens of thousands of jobs potentially opening up in New York State. One of you will give the number, but tens of thousands of jobs. In every aspect of this, the retail, the delivery, building out the sites, marketing, and we want to make sure that those jobs also go to people who otherwise might have been harmed by criminalization. And I think that we have work to do on that. As Jesse Campoamor says very powerfully, there's a lot of trauma associated with this product, and that people associate it with violence or hardship or incarceration, and they have a natural block to want to work in this industry. And that would be a terrible shame, because it would leave that opportunity, it would take it out of the grasp of people who could benefit and grow economically. So hopefully we're going to talk about all of this. And I'm going to ask each of you to start with just a short, big picture. How are we doing? How's New York doing at this moment, the dawn of this new sector, on April 18th, 2023? Vikiana, I'll start with you.
Well, I can only give insight into what I know, and what I know is education. Our students are doing really well. In regards to the industry, at this point, even though there's only a few dispensaries that are open, those dispensaries do contact us for our students, and our students are employed. They're not even done with the program, they're employed. And I'm not just saying employed there's all different types of opportunities in dispensaries, but I can say that our students are already managers, getting paid more than me. That's why they now have to take me out to lunch, because I'm not doing that anymore. So in regards to the education and opportunities and job, I can say that there's a lot of opportunities within expanding your vision on where you want to be in this space. Earlier, I believe it was Dr. Knox who said it, we're building the plane as we're flying, so there's going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of different types of jobs. And so what I challenge everyone here is to think about what is it that motivates you? I didn't say what was easy, because nothing in this life is easy, and if it is, that's a problem. What motivates you to endure in what you do on a daily basis? Is it photography? Is it cooking? Is it, you name it, and then try to create your own space there within the cannabis industry, because those skills are transferable. And I'll pass it over to Tanisha.
And Tanisha, what I'll ask for you, because you have, I think, a national perspective, not just Ohio and also Missouri, but I mean, you've led.
I just crawled out from under a rock yesterday.
So could you maybe say how do you feel New York is doing based on your national perspective?
So I think for starters, I think New York comes with great intent and is still working through the policy structures. But in terms of addressing some of the hindrances for social equity in cannabis. I would say in terms of access to capital, real estate, a lot of those big hurdles, I think the intent is fully there. I think obviously New York's off to a much slower start than everyone would hope. And how this policy manifests functionally from a business perspective, I think there's some potentially unintended consequences around some of the restrictions for the card licenses, et cetera. So I think, but I do think there's a willingness from policymakers to iterate more quickly than we've seen in some states that are just like, well, that program didn't work and I told you those people couldn't succeed and so fuck it. So the good news is I think that New York is on a better path, even though, I think everybody wants it to happen more quickly.
Dasheeda, I'm going to mix it up a little bit because you gave us a good overview. Talk to us about what is the economic potential in New York? How many businesses, not just dispensaries, but every angle of this sector? How many jobs? How much revenue? Tax receipts? Like, what is the economic opportunity here?
Well, we know the economic opportunity is huge, and I can talk from a New York City perspective. We are projecting $1.3 billion in just New York City alone in the first year of full sales, and 24 to 29,000 jobs in the first 3 years. But just to quickly kind of button up what was said, given the national experience I have, number one, New York isn't moving too slow. They just didn't do enough research on what the other markets did, right? Because every market also took this much time. Every market had a lag period between legalization and opening a regulatory market. Every market had unlicensed shops pop up, and we just didn't, we thought it wouldn't be us. And I think sometimes New York likes to think, and I know because I'm from New York, that we're different, but sometimes we also have to follow the benchmarks. So we wouldn't be thinking we were moving slow if we were all paying attention to the benchmarks. Number two, we are still jumping like huge hurdles to go after the highest rung, and we're leaving some money on the table here. Number one, you can get a hemp license right now for $300 in New York State, and there's still not a proliferation of brands forming under that. If we all understand that cannabis is one genus and hemp and marijuana are really separated by no scientific means, but really government means, then you should be using more of the hemp side of things to build brand, stack your paper, transition your maybe illegal activity into a more legal format, and we're still seeing that left on the table. And I'm also not seeing enough medical cannabis patients take on the advantages of now not having a cost to certify, being able to eventually auto-certify. Those two markers are actually important for what the adult use market is going to look like. So we can project billions of dollars like other markets across the country. We will not get there if we don't have more medical cannabis consumers, because medical cannabis consumers are always a consumer. We know it works for us. So we always shopping, whether it's in a brownie or whether it's in a patch or a suppository. We're always shopping, and we often are the trendsetters on ensuring that there's innovation. The last thing I'll say is that all of this is an experiment. Social equity, as Dr. Rachel defined it, is the fairness in the way resources and policies are written. And we've never really had that in America, real talk, right? We just haven't. We're working around that. And so what I will say is that we projected a certain outcome, to your point, with an intent, with CARD. And I think the biggest challenge we have right now is that sometimes government will not pivot even if we're headed off the cliff. And all I can say is that in New York City, what we're really advocating for is some pivoting to happen to be able to capitalize on what we feel like is the moment. Priority does not lead to prosperity without financing, right? We can prioritize licensing all day.
Say that again.
Priority does not lead to prosperity without financing. So we can prioritize licensing all day, put people first, but all we're doing is putting them in a waiting room unless they are given the resources and the finances to move forward. The clock is already on for the 3 years until the registered organizations are supposed to be able to have access. Meanwhile, we still don't have it open. So while I think we have a huge amount of opportunity, I would give us still, a C or so in our grade range on where we are right now, because we're going to have to pivot. And I give props to OCM for being able to do that. The good news is, luckily, a lot of this isn't in statute. We learned our lesson there, and we can pivot because the regulations can be changed. But it's a multi-billion-dollar industry only if we acknowledge that we have some low-hanging fruit. We all need to step into it. Don't be afraid, even though it doesn't feel sexy. It's not real weed versus not. Hemp-derived flower, hemp-derived products is still really important, and ultimately, it's still the long money, and we're missing that at this point.
Okay. Yes, please. Vikiana, maybe you can talk to us about just what are the many entrepreneurial opportunities. I think we know about dispensaries, but there's half a dozen other niches in this sector. What is the diversity of economic opportunities here?
So first, I will hint at, if you look at your flyers, there's opportunities in formulations and testing in health, cultivation and commercialization. So these are on the macro level, right? Now, right now, a lot of people are like, dispensary licenses, so important. This is true. I'm not taking away from that. But let me ask you this. Do you know that if you come up with something, a formula, I like to call them synthesis, for a product, that you can patent that, and that once you patent that, you can sell that to many companies, and that right there is you embedding yourself for generational wealth. So what we need to do is we need to kind of pivot the way we think. Testing. Right now, there are not that many testing licenses that have been approved. It's one of the toughest ones to get. It also stands in silo. You may see one in Brooklyn. I don't know, I'm not saying nothing. But anywho, imagine you had that training. You now have set yourself apart from so many people racing into a hole that has a lot of bottlenecks because so many people are going down that tunnel, right? So you can go down another path. I'm very obsessed with the sciences because I wasn't a scientist, by the way, before. I was more of a, what do you call those? Philosophers. And I wanted the cool, calm life. And I was afraid of the sciences. So if I want to tell everyone that you shouldn't. Science is a lot of fun. Anybody here know Little Uzi? Imagine listening to Little Uzi in a biochem lab. That's the kind of fun that I'm talking about. So definitely there are a lot of opportunity in the sciences. Entrepreneurism, which Tanisha can talk about, is always something that you can marry to any field, whether it be, where's the young lady who was talking about social work? Hi. Definitely you can come to my office, 5th floor, AB1 building at Mega Evers, because of course I have office hours. She's a social worker in the health, fighting the good fight. They are very important. They are extremely important. If you don't believe me, then you were not here for COVID. Now, she wants to go into hopefully a trajectory that marries that with cannabis. That's entrepreneurism, okay? So again, there are so many opportunities in terms of job positions. Definitely if you want like a catalog or a list, or if you need help, you can come to Mega Evers, and I'm there in the 5th floor. My foundation, the non-for-profit Legacy Corps, what we've done is we've partnered with the institution to do an entrepreneurial lab. And so what we do is we help constituents that are in a non-compliant business, small business operation, transition into what they would like to see in the cannabis industry. So definitely, please be there.
Tanisha, I think that you have financed a number of businesses, correct?
Yes, I'm one of the maybe 3 digits worth of black women that have raised over $1 million in venture capital. But unfortunately, it's around 100 ever. So it's, but yeah, I am.
101 may be in this room.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is probably the most common question people ask if they want to get into the industry. How do I get financing for a dispensary, but also for the other businesses doing basic research or marketing?
I think that we should zoom out, because the reality is that not everyone should be an entrepreneur. And it is a farce to say you're going to get a license and then you're going to be a millionaire. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, I got my license, this is generational wealth. And actually, it's a headache, and it is brutal to build your own business without all of the regulatory and compliance stuff that comes with cannabis, and without all, and first of all, there is not a line out the door for people trying to give black people money to build any kind of businesses. Any. Right? Nothing. And so in cannabis, it's even more difficult because of the tax structures, and there's just so much regulatory, regulatory fuckery to try to get through it. And so, first of all, not everyone should be an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur because I am not employable. I'm willful, I have authority issues, and I obviously swear constantly. But I gotta eat. So the way that I think about business building, though, is for those among us that can build, that community impact starts with how you treat your team. So there's a lot of folks that get awards for philanthropy but pay their teams minimum wage. And so I think it is both entrepreneurship and workforce development, which has been referenced a lot in this, and that you are taking great care of your people. Because if you look at more broad participation in cannabis, never mind in New York, but like there's about 4% and dropping of black and brown people in cannabis. And if you look at the boardrooms and the C-suites, that number goes to a fraction of a percent. And so a lot of our folks are on the front lines, and so this is why the education component and so much of the workforce development piece is so important, is because it's like, how do we create upward mobility and high-paying jobs with living wages and affordable health care and paid time off for hourly workers? Because that is actually what creates community impact, is how you treat your people and their people.
So, Dasheeda, maybe you can talk to us about the opportunities available for people who don't want the headache of owning a business with all the risk, because businesses fail, some do.
You don't want it. You don't want it. Most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs. Most people shouldn't.
So if someone comes to that conclusion about themselves and reflects, there's still tens of thousands of opportunities. Could you talk about what they are and how people can access them?
Sure. I think we always want to start with what our experience is. And so most of us know the buying and selling component. And so that's easy to understand. Oh, I can work in the retail store, or I can work in delivery. But as we go down the supply chain all the way back to the nursery and the genetics, as someone who also is obsessed with the science, I'm a molecular biologist, I definitely want to see more people dealing in the genetics and helping to develop cultivars, chemovars, or strains, which are not quite interchangeable, but if you don't know what those things are and you are curious, then that might be a job for you. Right now, we have a real void between 0.3% THC and about 20% THC, and I'd love to see what we create in that void. When we think about cultivation and manufacturing, I shout out people like Jesse Horton, who trained as an engineer and is one of the best cultivators in the country. And when you look at the way he set up his cultivation, that engineering degree comes into play, whether it's the curing room and how he set it up so it's easy, or his trim room so that he's not overusing workers' arms and the way that they are comfortable and able to actually trim. I think when we think about manufacturing, we think about, well, on the hemp side, who's building the machine for decortication? If you don't know what decortication is and you're interested and you're curious, maybe that might be a job for you. But the reality is, along the supply chain, there are jobs, and it really depends on what you personally like to do. Even within distribution, this is the job that I probably would want the least, but imagine driving throughout the state of New York and bringing weed from here to there. I actually think it's a pretty cool job. It's probably high risk as well, especially if you're black and brown, but it is still one of those things that if you're already a driver and that's already what you're doing, and you're not necessarily like, okay, I want to take on the risk of the ownership, you may want that role as a driver. You may want a role in security. Shout out to the security in the 3 dispensaries. I know them quite well, because often I come up and I'm like, I'm the czar, y'all don't know me? And they're like, nah, where's your ID? And I'm like, it's all good, I'm 44, I'll take being ID'd. No, that's a perfect example of taking something that you could moonlight all over, things that you maybe done at a bar or at a club can now be, applied here in a dispensary. So I think when you think about the jobs, think seed to sale. And even beyond then, right now, there are a lot of people who do not know how to shop. One of my favorite jobs is to be a personal shopper. I did this in Arizona for a little bit when I first got into the legal market. That's the market I joined. A lot of people over 65 are intimidated by the legal market, but they know that this works for them. And being able to take tours and come in as a group is like both an entrepreneurial opportunity, but it also could be a job for a dispensary who wants to actually increase the amount of people that come into their store. I have ideas for days, and that's why ultimately I suggest get in touch with New York City's cannabis office, because what we're doing is trying to roll out as much of this information and education so people just have options. And that's nyc.gov/cannabis.
And on top of that as well, like other service providers. So even if you're not in the cannabis industry, if you are into accounting or trash pickup, there's a whole range of services that cannabis companies need. And so I think that's another realm where, if you end up owning a business, you can think about your own supplier diversity as well as the diversity of your team.
Vikiana, for people who are crazy enough to take that leap to become entrepreneurs, whether it's in retail or manufacturing or marketing or security, where's the help?
Ooh, okay. I asked this question too. In regards to education, at MEC, again, we've done what we can, especially this year, making education accessible and having pipeline relationships with different businesses. But I believe that the state and the city should be funding a lot of small businesses. And OCM, I believe, is doing their best in the rollout, but I believe that the city and the state needs to show with actions that they do support small businesses. What do I mean? Well, there's a lot of different seed grants that have come out for small businesses. I think as well as, we can't do SBA because I guess federal, but there's a lot of seed grants that have come out to support non-cannabis small businesses. There should be an initiative to have the same thing for this developing industry here in New York. That's just my opinion. So the only help that I know of that is right now coming through is the academic help, because we've not only provided an amazing program, networking relationships, mentoring, and now we've solved the problem of people not being able to access due to limited funds. And I just hope that the city and the state somehow come up with more financial support for these small businesses.
Please applause, yes?
Sorry if some people got mad at that, sorry.
Tanisha, as someone who was crazy enough to start some businesses, who's built some great businesses, and by your own admission, you've overcome some failures as well. That's what it means to be an entrepreneur, by the way. What advice can you give from one entrepreneur to another about how to do this?
So I would say knowing your numbers and really studying how to speak, especially because cannabis businesses are extremely capital intensive. So, really being prepared to know what investors want and what their motivations are, and being able to speak to them relative to your business plan, to your financials, to your pro formas. I think, one of the challenges that I see in a lot of social equity structures is that there are pretty significant constraints on ownership and one's ability to sell their own business, which, sometimes, like I said, there's not a line out the door of people trying to give Black people money for any business. And so, a lot of times folks will sign away half of their company for $1 million thinking, okay, this is awesome, we made it. And then they get ice with their logo on it, and then they have a real brand, and that's not a thing either, but we've all seen that. Come on, you guys. Yeah. So, but understanding, like really understanding what you're getting into, and I think, one of the things that I get very frustrated by is there are a lot of consultants out there that haven't built real businesses and that are preying on these would-be entrepreneurs. And so, and unfortunately, I've advised some entrepreneurs that have just been like, okay, we got this packet, and now we're ready to talk to investors, and there's nothing. And so I think just really trying to, it's like it's a tough game, but it's certainly possible. I mean, the capital environment is very, very difficult right now for cannabis, but also for startups and for everything else. So I think it's just being really aware of the timing. I mean, timing is everything in any startup, and so I think. It's challenging, but if you know your numbers, you have a good story, and you have a plan and a great team, because they're always wanting to look at who is with you on this journey. I think that's really key, and then making sure that you set up your business with a great lawyer. A lot of folks are like, oh yeah, I went to this startup weekend and we created an LLC, and now this guy owns half of my company, and turns out we're not friends, and then it's very difficult to extract yourself from some of those really tough relationships. And so there's some structures that you can set up that make all the partners even earn their equity over time. And so it's just really about being thoughtful about that initial setup so that you can set your business up for success in the long term is a big piece.
Amazing. We are almost out of time. We had a minute left. Dasheeda, could you talk about what this industry will mean for New York City more broadly? What it could mean for tourism, for real estate, for hospitality, the broader economic ripples that could radiate out?
Well, we're already the global capital of the world for so many different things. It wouldn't surprise me, and in fact, that's our goal, to be the cannabis capital of the world. We have the consumer base, we have the culture, and we have the education that's leading in the country. And so this means that we are very much poised to be the place that all of these countries, Thailand, Germany, Ghana, Colombia, really come to, and they have already on the policy, but how to do business, how to improve business will be learned here. And I do think it's important for us to acknowledge that this is an opportunity also for that tax revenue to be invested into communities. And when we look at that, there's some reports, shout out to Supernova Women that showed that for every $1 invested into equity operators, there's a projected $4.36 out when we have that cannabis tax revenue invested back into communities, into youth education, into mental health, as well as into understanding cannabis as medicine and using the larger part of the plant for other things like affordable housing and the like. The last thing I'll say is we are doing a lot in the city around sustainability, and one of the things we are not talking about enough is the power of this plant as it comes to soil remediation, as it pertains to agriculture. And so we have that opportunity to do that here because the mayor has an Office of Urban Agriculture as well. We'll have the full supply chain here, and that's going to be a big deal.
My goodness. Give it up for Dasheeda Dawson, Tanisha Robinson, Vikiana Reyes. They have been amazing. Un aplauso, señores. Thank you so much. Thank you.